Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk here at RSA 2023. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading. Joining me now is Rick McElroy, Principal Security Strategist with VMware. Rick, thanks for joining us on the news desk today.
Terry, thanks for having me.
Lateral security has been a focus of VMware's for a couple RSAs at this point. For people who may be new to this concept, talk about why lateral movement has become such a serious threat to organizations.
Yeah, well, I really think it's the way lateral movement has changed. So historically, attackers have had to move across switches and routers, and it gave all kinds of defensive opportunities to actually catch what they're doing. Well, if I do that inside of a hypervisor, I don't have to go across a router, I don't have to go across a switch, and oh, by the way, all of that traffic is encrypted. So it presents some opportunities for defenders to really look at the data that's occurring down there to try to catch what these adversaries are doing. So I think it has more to do with how it's shifted from an adversarial perspective, more than anything.
Well, with the advent of virtualization, as you're saying, if they have access to the hypervisor, it's the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah, well, if I have access to the hypervisor, I can move around at will. Again, that traffic is encrypted. It's very hard to detect or to even deploy a sensor down in there to do it. So a bunch of the work we've been doing at VMware is really focused around that, exposing it, building machine learning models to understand normal and abnormal, and really drive, I think, a lower level of risk for our customers.
Okay. Say more about what you're hearing from customers with regard to the top of mind security concerns, the things that keep them up at night.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things. On the people side, it's really retention. It's no longer recruitment. I think universities, we're really pumping out cyber defenders. However, when it comes to senior folks out there, I think retention is a piece. And then on the technology side, I think given inflation, given business downturn, really what CISOs want to do is use the fewest number of tools possible in an automated way, right? So they're really looking at automation to hit the scale to help them, maintain a smaller team that can still meet the need for the organization.
All right. With that in mind, of course, we're curious about your thoughts around how customers can improve their own security posture. I think specifically we're looking at how VMware is building security in a way that really fits the cloud operating models that you've been describing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the things that I talk to CISOs the most about is how do you maintain control consistency in a multi-cloud world where your cloud workload could move around based on cheapest cost, right? So the CIOs care about cost of the organization. They're going to move things around as it makes sense, but the control framework has to move with it, right? So how do you do this without deploying new sensors, without tuning new things? Well, your security stack should move along with your workload regardless of the cloud that it sits in. So a ton of the work we've been doing at VMware is really geared up, around that idea.
Great. Ransomware, of course, is also top of mind for a lot of CISOs. Is this still a concern that you're hearing from the customers you're in touch with?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I'd like to add something to the ransomware discussion.
Sure.
So over the last 6 months, you've seen more destructive wipers released into the wild as a result of, a geopolitical warfare. And so what we're seeing from a ransomware perspective is it's not just about extortion anymore. You're actually seeing destructive payloads become part of those pieces of malware. And really, what's the point for the attackers and cyber criminals? Well, I want to punitively punish you. Or, I'm going to have some sort of political ideology that I'm going to use against your organization, or I'm going to try to knock some of your supply chain down to cause a business impact.
How does VMware address this?
Yeah, well, I think fundamentally, look, we operate on the premise that if you can't see it, you can't stop it, right? So as we look broadly at our prevention, detection, and response strategy, it's a multi-domain strategy, right? So very recently, we released our XDR model into the market, right, which we think is superior to everybody else's. But our journey is going to remain the same, moving across this virtualized infrastructure to turn the lights on, to understand how these adversaries are actually moving around or executing payloads, and move to prevent them as soon as possible.
Right. The other hot topic, of course, here at RSA, let's say it together, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And all its permutations from generative AI to machine learning, et cetera. Talk a bit about how VMware's thinking has evolved through these various iterations, these new applications, the frightening new potential of it.
Sure. Yeah, well, look, I think it all started for most of us in the industry, especially on the defensive side, looking at supervised and unsupervised models to do better versions of prevention, detection, and response, right? And that journey continues. Lots of expertise has been built around that, right? But the idea of really bringing, an artificially intelligent system into your decision-making process today, I think, we're at those early stages. But I do see usefulness out of, being able to provide some relief to your team from like a help desk perspective, right? Or have some maybe more automated interactions with your customer base as you're out there as a security team so that you can work on the engineering projects. But again, I think if people are looking at AI today to come solve this problem, I would tell them to spend more time patching their systems. That's really what we see from a fundamentals perspective is, the vendors, manufacturers are getting patches out, but 18 months to 2 years later, they're still not in production, and that's a real problem I think we got to work through in the industry. So I'm a little less apt to go look at the shiny new object and really kind of focus back on those good cyber hygiene fundamentals that bite people all the time.
That makes sense. Nonetheless, the hype around, the marketing messaging, especially around AI, is pretty hard to overlook. Nonetheless, customers are thinking like, how much do I need this? I'm sure you get questions all the time about it. What do you tell customers about their own readiness or what they should be looking at?
Yeah, I think there's a number of considerations there. I mean, first off, it starts with budget. Does your team feel like they can go down that rabbit hole, right? And that rabbit hole may actually yield fruit down the road. However, you're going to have to train people. You're going to have to bring in expertise, right? All of these things. And do you have a large enough data set to train that model on, right? So this becomes crucial. And I think a key area that I see vendors being able to provide a huge amount of value. After all, we're ingesting petabytes of endpoint data on a daily basis. I think that gives us a little better viewpoint to contextualize and write these models. Whereas an organization themselves may find that given the time, the resources that they have, it may not be something they want to invest in, right? So I think that's the consideration for me. Where should the team invest time? If it makes sense to go down that road, great. If it doesn't, and I would bet for the vast majority of organizations on the planet, it probably doesn't, they're going to look to a partner, they're going to look to a vendor to provide that expertise for them.
Well, Rick, some great insights around cloud security, virtualization, and of course, AI. Thanks for joining us on the News Desk today.
Thanks for having me.
We've been talking with Rick McElroy of VMware. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.